I'm Camila, 29 years old, and this is the story of how I finally broke free. After years of seeking approval that never came, I graduated college with honors in psychology. That should have been my proudest moment. Instead, at my graduation dinner, my parents uttered words that shattered my world. "We wish you were never born." What they never expected was my response, words that silenced an entire restaurant and changed my life forever. If you have ever felt unappreciated by those who should love you most, this story might resonate with you. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family. Growing up in Brooklyn, an affluent suburb of Boston, my childhood looked perfect from the outside. Our colonial-style house with its manicured lawn, and my parents, Logan and Ovidia Johnson, were the picture of upper-middle-class success. My father was a corporate attorney at a prestigious firm downtown, and my mother was heavily involved in local charity organizations, not out of compassion, but for the social standing it provided. From my earliest memories, nothing I did was ever quite good enough. When I brought home an A- in third grade, my father looked at the paper with such disappointment you would have thought I had failed entirely. "The Rodriguez girl got straight A's," he said, sliding the paper back across the kitchen counter. "I expect better next time." I remember nodding, fighting back tears as I retreated to my room. That pattern continued throughout my childhood. If I won second place in a science fair, the conversation would center around who won first and what I should have done differently. When I made the swim team, but wasn't the fastest, dinner conversation revolved around how I needed to train harder. There was always someone better, always a higher bar I had failed to reach. My father had a very specific vision for my future: medicine, law, or business. Nothing else was acceptable. "Those are careers with prestige," he would say during our Sunday dinners, cutting his roast beef into precise pieces. "Everything else is settling for less." My mother was no better, though her focus was different. Where my father demanded academic and career excellence, she scrutinized my appearance and social connections. "Camila, you could be so pretty if you lost 10 pounds, she would say while examining herself in the hallway mirror. Or why aren't you friends with the Sullivan girl? Her father is on the hospital board. Every friendship, every outfit, every aspect of my appearance was evaluated for how it would reflect on the family. The only person who seemed to see me for who I was my grandmother Linda, my father's mother. Unlike her son, she had a warmth that made her home feel like a sanctuary. "You have a beautiful mind," she would tell me when I shared my thoughts about books we had both read. "Never let anyone dim your light." During visits to her small apartment across town, I discovered psychology books on her shelves. She had been a counselor before retiring, and our conversations about human behavior and emotional health sparked something in me. For the first time, I found a subject that fascinated me completely. "Psychology is for people who couldn't handle real science," my father scoffed when I mentioned my interest at 15. "It's all subjective nonsense." My mother nodded in agreement, adding, "Besides, darling, those people barely make any money." Despite their dismissal, I secretly devoured books on psychology, hiding them under my mattress like contraband. When it came time for college applications, I applied to psychology programs despite my parents' insistence on pre-law or pre-med tracks. This led to the biggest fight we'd ever had. "We are not paying for you to get some useless degree," my father shouted, his face red with anger. "Not when you have the capabilities to do something worthwhile." "Psychology is worthwhile," I argued back, for once standing my ground. "People need help understanding themselves and others. People need to pull themselves together and stop whining," he retorted. "This discussion is over." It wasn't over, though. My grandmother Linda stepped in, offering to help with my tuition. "Your future belongs to you, not your parents," she told me over tea in her small kitchen. "Study what calls to your heart." My parents reluctantly agreed, but their disapproval was palpable. Every holiday break was filled with thinly veiled comments about real careers and wasting potential. Then, during my sophomore year, Linda passed away unexpectedly. I was devastated, losing not just my grandmother, but my only true ally in the family. She left me a modest inheritance that helped with remaining tuition costs, along with a letter I keep to this day. "Your compassion is your strength. The world needs more hearts like yours." After her funeral, my parents seemed to double down on their criticism. Without Linda to buffer their disapproval, I felt more alone than ever. I threw myself into my studies, determined to graduate with honors, hoping that academic excellence might finally win their approval. All the while, anxiety gnawed at me. I started having panic attacks before family visits, my stomach knotting with dread at the inevitable criticism that awaited. By senior year, I had developed coping mechanisms: deep breathing, positive self-talk, and seeking support from the few friends who understood. But the deep-seated need for parental approval never quite went away. Despite everything, some childish part of me still hoped that one day they would see me, really see me, and be proud of who I had become. My college experience at Northeastern University was transformative, despite the shadow my parents cast over it. For the first time, I found myself surrounded by people who valued ideas and conversation without constant judgment. My roommate Harper was studying journalism and had a refreshing directness I admired immediately. "Your parents sound like nightmares," she said bluntly after hearing about one particularly unpleasant holiday visit. "You know that's not normal, right?" Then there was Andrew from my research methods class, whose quick humor and genuine interest in psychology matched my own. He had grown up in foster care and had a perspective on family that challenged my ingrained beliefs. "Family is who treats you like you matter," he told me once over coffee. "Sometimes that's not the people who share your DNA." Their friendship created a safe space where I could be authentic without fear of criticism. Slowly, I started to discover who I was outside of my parents' expectations. I joined the Psychology Honor Society, volunteered at a crisis text line, and found myself drawn specifically to developmental psychology, the study of how people grow and change throughout their lives. In my junior year, I caught the attention of Dr. Rosenberg, a well-respected professor in the field. She invited me to assist with her research on resilience in young adults who had faced early life adversity. The irony wasn't lost on me, studying resilience while trying to build my own. "You have exceptional insight, Camila," Dr. Rosenberg told me after I presented preliminary findings to the research team. "Have you considered graduate school? With your abilities, you could make significant contributions to the field." Her validation was like water in a desert. I worked harder than ever, staying late in the lab, refining research protocols, and helping to prepare presentations for conferences. When she suggested I apply for a position at the Bowman Institute for Human Development in Seattle, I was both terrified and exhilarated. The institute was nationally recognized, and such a position would be a tremendous start to my career. "They're very interested in you, Camilla," Dr. Rosenberg said when she called me into her office one snowy February afternoon. "Your application was impressive, and my recommendation couldn't have been stronger. They want you to start in August after graduation." I sat in stunned silence, clutching the official offer letter. A real job at a prestigious research institute, doing work I was passionate about. This was validation that my chosen path had value, despite what my parents had always claimed. As graduation approached, I threw myself into final exams and completing my thesis on emotional regulation strategies. The work was demanding but fulfilling. For the first time, I could envision a future where I built a career I loved, rather than one chosen to please others. 3 weeks before graduation, my mother called. I braced myself for the usual questioning about my plans, ready to defend my job offer yet again. "Your father and I have been talking," she said, her voice carrying its usual crisp efficiency. "We would like to attend your graduation ceremony." I nearly dropped the phone. In our previous conversations, they had been vague about whether they would come, citing busy schedules and the inconvenience of travel from Boston to the university. "Really?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. "Of course, darling. It's a milestone after all, and your father has some connections. He'd like you to meet people who might help you find a more suitable position than this research thing." I should have recognized the agenda behind their sudden interest,
but hope clouded my judgment. Maybe they were finally coming around. Maybe seeing me graduate with honors would make them realize that psychology was a legitimate field and that I had talent worth respecting. With a newfound optimism, I threw myself into graduation preparations. I bought a new dress, a sophisticated navy blue that looked professional yet stylish. I made dinner reservations, cleaned my apartment obsessively in case they wanted to see it, and rehearsed ways to present my job offer in terms that might impress them. "They're really coming," I told Harper as we tried on our graduation gowns in our apartment. "Maybe things will be different now." Harper looked skeptical, but supportive. "Just remember who you are," she said, adjusting my graduation cap, "no matter what they say or do." The night before graduation, I lay awake imagining scenarios where my father would shake my hand with genuine pride, where my mother would hug me without stiffness, where they would finally say the words I had longed to hear. "We're proud of you." The fantasy was so vivid, I could almost believe it might happen. Morning came with sunshine streaming through my windows and butterflies in my stomach. As I applied my makeup carefully and styled my hair, I felt like I was preparing for the most important job interview of my life. Because in a way, I was. Still trying to get hired as the daughter they could love unconditionally.
Graduation morning arrived with perfect New England spring weather. Sunshine warming the historic campus buildings and a gentle breeze stirring the leaves. I woke up early, too nervous to sleep, and spent extra time getting ready. My navy blue dress hung pressed and ready, and I laid out the honor cords I had earned through my academic achievements. "Today's the day they finally see me," I whispered to my reflection as I applied mascara with slightly trembling hands. Harper knocked on my bedroom door. "Your chariot awaits, valedictorian," she joked, though I wasn't actually valedictorian, just graduating summa cum laude. We arrived at the campus arena 2 hours early as instructed. The place was already buzzing with excited graduates adjusting caps and taking photos. I texted my parents to let them know where they could find seats with a good view. "We're already here," came my mother's reply. My father wanted to make sure we got proper seating. I spotted them in the family waiting area. My father in an expensive charcoal suit that screamed corporate success. My mother in a cream-colored dress and jacket, her pearl necklace catching the light. They looked like they were attending a business function rather than their daughter's graduation. "You made it," I said, approaching with a hopeful smile. "Traffic was lighter than expected," my father replied. "The ceremony starts at 10 o'clock, correct? I have calls scheduled for later this afternoon." No hug, no, "You look beautiful," or "We're proud of you." Just concern about his schedule. "Yes, 10 o'clock, I confirmed, my smile faltering slightly. "It should last about 2 hours. 2 hours for everyone to walk across a stage, my mother sighed. They could simply mail the diplomas and save everyone the time. I swallowed my disappointment. "I should go line up with my department. I'll see you afterward by the psychology building for photos." They nodded and I walked away, reminding myself that the day was still young. There was still time for things to change. The ceremony itself was a blur of emotions. Sitting among my fellow psychology graduates, I felt a surge of pride when our department was called, and we stood together. Walking across that stage, hearing my name announced with summa cum laude following it, gripping my diploma case, these moments felt monumental. I scanned the audience as I crossed the stage, spotting my parents in the 10th row. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a flicker of pride on my father's face as he raised his hand in a small wave, but it disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. After the ceremony, amid the chaos of thousands of graduates and families, I found my parents waiting by the psychology building, as planned. My mother immediately reached to adjust my cap, which had shifted slightly. "Stand straight, Camila," she instructed as my father positioned his expensive camera. No one wants photos of poor posture. We took the obligatory shots, me holding my diploma, me with each parent individually, one family photo that a passing student captured for us. Throughout it all, their compliments were surface level at best. The ceremony was well organized, my father remarked. Your hair looks nice pulled back like that, my mother added. Not congratulations or we're proud of you, just comments on logistics and appearance. As we walked toward the parking area, my father surprised me by saying, "We thought we might take you to dinner to celebrate. There's a French place downtown, La Chateau. I hear the food is excellent." La Chateau was one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, the kind of place my parents would normally reserve for business dinners or anniversary celebrations, never somewhere they would take me. "That sounds wonderful," I replied, hope flickering back to life. Perhaps this fancy dinner was their way of showing they cared, of marking the occasion as special. "I made reservations for 6:30, my father continued. "We can meet you there if you need to change or refresh." "No, I'll ride with you," I said quickly, not wanting to separate now that things seemed to be improving. "My dress is fine for the restaurant, right?" I glanced down at my carefully chosen outfit. My mother gave me a quick once-over and said, "It will do," with a small nod that I chose to interpret as approval. The drive to the restaurant was filled with what passed for pleasant conversation in our family. My father talking about a case he had recently won, my mother discussing an upcoming charity gala she was helping organize. I waited for them to ask about my plans, about the job offer I had accepted. But they didn't. Still, I remained optimistic as we pulled up to the restaurant's valet parking. Le Chateau was everything its reputation promised. Crystal chandeliers, pristine white tablecloths, servers in formal attire, and a hushed atmosphere of exclusivity. The maitre d' recognized my father immediately. "Mr. Johnson, welcome back. Your table is ready, the best in the house, as requested." We were led to a corner table near the windows, with an excellent view of both the restaurant and the city beyond. My father ordered champagne without consulting the menu, and I felt a small thrill at being treated as an adult worthy of celebration. When the champagne arrived, my father raised his glass. "To gratulation," he said simply. Not "to Camila" or "to your achievement," just to the event itself. Still, I clinked my glass against theirs and sipped the expensive champagne, determined to enjoy this rare moment of familial harmony. "This is lovely," I said, looking around at the elegant surroundings. "Thank you for bringing me here." "Every milestone deserves proper acknowledgement," my mother replied, studying her menu. "The foie gras here is exceptional." For a brief, shining moment as we ordered appetizers and made small talk about the restaurant's decor, I allowed myself to believe that this dinner represented a turning point in our relationship. Perhaps my graduation had finally proven my worth to them. The appetizers arrived. Delicate plates of seared scallops for my mother, escargot for my father, and a goat cheese salad for me. As we began to eat, my father asked about other graduates in my program. "Was that Sullivan girl in your department? Martha's daughter?" "Caitlin Sullivan was in business, not psychology," I replied, having only met her once at a campus mixer. "Smart Earl," my father nodded approvingly. "Business opens doors. I imagine she has several offers already." I took a deep breath, seeing my opening. "Actually, I have some good news about my job. The position at the Bowman Institute." "Yes, that research place," my mother interrupted, waving her fork dismissively. "What exactly will you be doing there? Filing papers and making coffee?" "No, Mother," I said, maintaining my composure. "The institute is very well respected. Their research has influenced educational policy across the country." Policy.
my father repeated with a slight sneer. Politics and paperwork. You could have been a surgeon, Camila, or a corporate attorney. You had the test scores, the intelligence. Instead, you'll spend your days asking people about their feelings. The main courses arrived: filet mignon for my father, sea bass for my mother, and roasted duck for me. The timing provided a brief respite from the criticism, but it didn't last long. "We ran into the gardeners last week," my mother said as she delicately cut her fish. "Their son just finished his first year at Harvard Medical, top of his class." "Good for him," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "He was in your advanced placement classes in high school, wasn't he?" my father asked, though he knew perfectly well that he was. "Same opportunities, but he chose to apply himself to something substantial." Each word felt like a small cut. I had graduated with honors, secured a position at a respected institution, and was about to begin a career I was passionate about. Yet in their eyes, I had failed because I hadn't chosen the path they wanted. "Psychology is substantial," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Understanding human behavior and emotional development has real-world applications. My research could help identify early intervention strategies for at-risk youth." My father took a long sip of his wine before responding. "Your mother and I have been patient, Camila. We allowed you to pursue this interest of yours. We thought perhaps you would come to your senses before graduation, realize the limitations you were placing on yourself." "It's not a limitation to follow your passion," I countered. "Passion," my mother sighed, as if the very word was distasteful. "Passion doesn't pay mortgages or build retirement accounts. Practical choices do." The conversation continued in this vein throughout the main course. My attempts to explain my career choice met with dismissal or derision. I felt myself shrinking in my seat, the old familiar feeling of inadequacy creeping over me like a cold shadow. As the waiter cleared our plates, my father ordered another bottle of wine without asking if anyone wanted it. When it arrived, he held up his glass in what appeared to be another toast. My heart lifted slightly. Perhaps, despite their criticism, they were still proud of me in some small way. "I'd like to say something," my father began, his voice taking on the formal tone he used for speeches at business functions. "Today marks the completion of your education, Camila, and while it's not the path we would have chosen for you, your mother and I acknowledge your persistence." It wasn't exactly warm praise, but it was something. I raised my glass slightly, waiting for him to continue. "However," he went on, his expression hardening, "I feel it necessary to express our disappointment. With your capabilities, you could have contributed meaningfully to society. Instead, you chose a soft science with questionable methodologies." My stomach began to drop, but he wasn't finished. "When we look at the other parents today celebrating children who will become doctors, lawyers, business leaders," he paused, exchanging a look with my mother. The air in the restaurant seemed to thicken with anticipation of what was coming next. The moment stretched like a taut wire about to snap. Other diners continued their conversations, unaware that my world was about to shatter, at table 12 by the window. My mother's expression remained neutral, almost bored, as if she knew what was coming and had already accepted it. "Well," my father continued, his voice carrying the same tone he might use to discuss a disappointing quarterly report, "sometimes we wish you were never born. Then we wouldn't have to explain your disappointing choices to our friends." The words hit me like a physical blow. I froze, my glass still halfway raised, unable to process what I had just heard. My mother didn't contradict him or come to my defense. Instead, she nodded slightly, as if what he had said was perfectly reasonable. The restaurants around us seemed to go silent, though I'm sure that was just my perception as shock washed over me.
A waiter who had been approaching our table with dessert menus stopped abruptly, clearly having overheard, and awkwardly retreated. Diners at nearby tables glanced over, then quickly away, embarrassed to have witnessed such a moment. I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to spin slightly, and I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. 22 years of criticism and emotional neglect had culminated in this statement, a clear, unambiguous declaration that my existence was a disappointment to them. In that moment, something inside me that had been bending for years finally broke. But instead of collapsing, I felt a strange clarity emerging through the pain. These people would never see me. They would never value me. And I had spent far too long trying to earn love that should have been freely given. The silence at our table stretched like an eternity. My father took a casual sip of his wine as if he hadn't just said something devastating. My mother adjusted her napkin, avoiding eye contact. Around us, the restaurant had resumed its normal hum of conversation, but several nearby diners were still casting concerned glances our way. I set my glass down with controlled motion, feeling strangely calm despite the earthquake happening inside me. My hands, which should have been shaking, were steady. With deliberate movements, I placed my napkin beside my plate and slowly stood up. Both my parents looked up, my father with irritation, my mother with confusion. "Camilla, we haven't finished dinner," she said, as if that were the issue at hand. I looked at them both, these two people who had brought me into the world but never truly seen me. When I spoke, my voice was clear and unwavering, surprising even myself. "If that is what you wish, then consider me as if I never existed. Live your lives as though there was never a daughter named Camilla." The entire restaurant went silent. A waiter dropped a spoon somewhere in the background, the clatter almost comically loud in the hushed atmosphere. "From this moment forward, you no longer have to explain me or my choices to anyone. You no longer have to feel disappointed by my existence. I release you from the burden of having a daughter who dared to follow her own path instead of living the life you prescribed." My father's face flushed dark red. "Camilla, you're making a scene. Sit down immediately." "No," I said simply. "I will not sit down. Not today, not ever again. For 22 years, I've tried to earn your approval, your love. I see now that was never possible, not because I failed, but because you were incapable of giving it." I picked up my small clutch purse from beside my chair. "Thank you for dinner and for the clarity. I finally understand that I will never be enough for you. But here's what you fail to see. I am more than enough for myself." With that, I turned and walked through the silent restaurant, my head high despite the tears threatening to spill. I could feel every eye on me, but for once, I didn't care what anyone thought. Not the other diners, not the staff, and especially not my parents. The walk to my car felt like crossing a bridge I could never return over. Each step was deliberate, purposeful. Behind me, I could hear my father's voice rising, probably trying to salvage their dignity in front of the other patrons. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. It wasn't until I reached my car in the parking lot that my composure finally cracked. My hands shook so badly I couldn't get the key into the ignition. The tears came then, heaving sobs that bent me over the steering wheel. All the years of seeking validation, of trying to be perfect, of hoping that someday I would be enough, it all poured out of me in that parking lot. The physical reaction was overwhelming. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. I rolled down the windows, letting the cool evening air wash over my flushed face. In the distance, I could see other graduation families walking to their cars, laughing and celebrating. Normal families doing normal things. The contrast made my heart ache even more. After what seemed like hours but was probably only 15 minutes, I managed to calm myself enough to drive. My phone was buzzing constantly in my purse. texts and calls that I knew were from my parents. I turned it to silent and focused on the road ahead. Without conscious thought, I headed straight to Harper's apartment. She lived in a converted brownstone near campus, and I had spent countless evenings there studying and venting about family stress. Now I was showing up in crisis mode, still in my graduation dress, makeup smeared, looking like I'd been through a war. She opened the door, took one look at my tear-stained face, and pulled me into a tight hug without saying a word. Harper had always been intuitive about when to talk and when to just be present. This was definitely a time for presence. They said they wish I had never been born, I whispered against her shoulder, the words feeling surreal as I spoke them out loud. Then they don't deserve you, she replied firmly, her voice filled with protective anger. Not one bit of you. I collapsed onto her familiar sofa, the same one where we'd had countless late-night conversations about everything from psychology theories to relationship drama. Now I was showing up in crisis mode, still in my graduation dress, makeup smeared, looking like I had been through a war. Harper opened the door, took one look at my tear-stained face, and pulled me into a tight hug without saying a word. Harper had always been intuitive about when to talk and when to just be present. This was definitely a time for presence. They said they wish I had never been born, I whispered against her shoulder, the words feeling surreal as I spoke them out loud. Then they don't deserve you, she replied firmly, her voice filled with protective anger. Not one bit of you. I collapsed onto her familiar sofa, the same one where we'd had countless late-night conversations about everything from psychology theories to relationship drama. Now I was showing up in crisis mode, still in my graduation dress, makeup smeared, looking like I'd been through a war. I crashed onto her familiar sofa, the same one where we'd had countless late-night conversations about everything from psychology theories to relationship drama. Harper went to make tea, a ritual she always performed when one of us was upset. The normalcy of it was comforting. The weight of what had happened was finally hitting me fully. 22 years of trying to earn love that was never available. 22 years of believing that if I just tried harder, achieved more, became better, they would finally see my worth. And now, in one devastating moment, they had made it clear that my very existence was a disappointment to them. My phone started buzzing again in my purse. I pulled it out to silence it completely and saw the messages already coming through. You're overreacting. This display was childish and embarrassing. Call us immediately so we can discuss your behavior. Your father is extremely upset. You've ruined what should have been a pleasant evening. People are staring at us. You need to come back and apologize right now. Not one apology, not one acknowledgement of the cruelty of their words, just blame and demands for compliance, as always. Reading their messages, I felt something shift inside me. The fog of hurt was clearing, replaced with a crystalline understanding of exactly who these people were and what they would never be capable of giving me. Harper returned with mugs of chamomile tea and took the phone from my hand, reading the messages with growing anger. Unbelievable, she muttered, setting the phone face down on the coffee table. You're absolutely not calling them back tonight or tomorrow or ever if you don't want to. The validation in her words was like a balm. For so long, I had been gaslit into believing that I was the problem, that my needs for basic respect and acceptance were unreasonable. Having someone else witness their behavior and confirm its toxicity was crucial for my sanity. She called Andrew, who arrived 20 minutes later with ice cream and a fierce protectiveness that made me cry all over again, but this time from gratitude. He took one look at me curled up on Harper's couch and immediately understood the gravity of what had happened. What did they do? He asked quietly, settling into the chair across from us. As I recounted the evening's events, I watched his expression shift from concern to outrage to something resembling grief. Grief for the childhood I'd never had, for the parents I'd needed but never received. You know this isn't about you, right? He said when I finished.
This is about their inability to love someone who doesn't fit their narrow definition of success.
That's their failure, not yours. These two people who had no obligation to me by blood or law showed more care and wisdom in one evening than my parents had in my entire life. They didn't try to minimize my pain or offer platitudes about family always working things out. Instead, they validated my feelings and supported my right to protect myself from further harm. We stayed up late, talking through what had happened and what might come next. We discussed practical matters, my job offer in Seattle, my lease ending soon, the logistics of completely separating from my parents. But more importantly, we talked about healing, about building a life based on my own values rather than their expectations. "You can stay here as long as you need," Harper offered around 2 in the morning. "My couch is your couch, and my kitchen is your kitchen." "We'll help you figure out next steps," Andrew added. "Whatever you need, emotional support, logistical help, someone to drive the moving truck. We're here." I finally fell asleep around 3 in the morning, emotionally exhausted, but with a strange sense of peace beneath the pain. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself completely, without apology, without compromise, without backing down when they tried to reassert control. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through Harper's living room windows, and my phone showed 37 missed calls and messages. The volume alone was staggering. They had been trying to reach me every few minutes throughout the night. I scrolled through them briefly, watching the tone evolve from anger to manipulation to desperation. My parents alternating between demands that I apologize for making a scene and attempts at guilt that grew increasingly frantic as the night had worn on. "You've embarrassed us in front of the entire restaurant. Your behavior reflects poorly on our family name. People will think we raised you poorly. Your father had to explain your outburst to 3 different colleagues who were dining there. We're concerned about your mental state. Perhaps you need professional help." This is what happens when children are given too much freedom to make poor choices. Reading their words with morning clarity, I saw something I had never fully recognized before. They had no power over me anymore. I was an adult with a degree, a job offer, and the ability to make my own choices. The only hold they had was emotional, and I could choose to break that hold. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it meant stepping into complete unknown territory without the safety net of family, even toxic family. Liberating because it meant I could finally stop trying to earn something that was never available to begin with. Sitting there on Harper's couch, still in my Navy graduation dress from the day before, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. I would take the job in Seattle, move across the country, and truly live as if I had no parents. Not out of spite or revenge, but as an act of self-preservation and growth. "I need to disappear from their lives completely," I told Harper when she emerged from her bedroom, her hair messy from sleep, but her eyes immediately alert with concern. "It's the only way I'll ever be free." She sat down beside me on the couch, wrapping a throw blanket around my shoulders. "Are you sure? That's a huge step, Camila. Once you do this, there might not be a way back." I looked at her, this friend who had seen me at my worst and still chose to care about me. "Harper, I'd spent my entire life trying to earn their love. Last night proved that it's never going to happen. They literally told me they wish I had never been born. How do I come back from that?" She nodded slowly, understanding without needing further explanation. "Then that's what we'll help you do. We'll help you disappear and start over." The next week passed in a whirlwind of activity. I formally accepted the position at the Bowman Institute, giving them my start date of August 1st, just 6 weeks away. Harper and Andrew helped me create a strategic exit plan that would minimize any contact with my parents while ensuring I could build a new life safely.
First, we tackled communication. I changed my phone number, giving the new one only to trusted friends and professional contacts. Harper helped me set up email filters to send my parents' messages directly to a folder I wouldn't have to see unless I chose to. We closed all my social media accounts and created new ones under slightly different variations of my name with strict privacy settings. It's like witness protection, Andrew joked as we worked on my digital disappearance, but from toxic family instead of criminals. The distinction felt less clear-cut than he probably intended. My lease was ending at the end of the month anyway, so I accelerated my moving plans. Harper and Andrew helped me pack my apartment into boxes, which we stored temporarily in Andrew's garage. Every item required a decision: keep, sell, or donate. I found myself ruthlessly editing my possessions, keeping only things that brought me joy or served a practical purpose in my new life. "Are you sure you want to sell this?" Harper asked, holding up a beautiful wooden jewelry box my parents had given me for my 18th birthday. I looked at it for a long moment. It was objectively beautiful, well-crafted, expensive. But every time I opened it, I would remember the conditions that came with it. Their lecture about how young ladies should present themselves, their critique of my existing jewelry as childish, and their not-so-subtle message that I needed to upgrade everything about myself to meet their standards. "Sell it," I said firmly. "I want to choose my own jewelry box." We sold my furniture rather than dealing with moving it across the country, keeping only books, clothes, and personal items that would fit in my car. I was amazed by how little I actually needed when I stripped away everything that had been chosen to impress others rather than please myself. "Are you sure you want to drive all that way alone?" Harper asked as we taped up another box. "That's a really long drive, and you'll be emotionally exhausted." "I need the time to think," I explained. 3,000 miles of open road and new beginnings. I need to process everything that's happened before I start my new job. The hardest part was dealing with the remaining financial connections. I had a joint bank account that had been established when I was a teenager for emergencies and education expenses. My parents had always held it over my head as evidence of their support, but I realize now it was actually a tool of control. They could monitor my spending and had access to my financial information. I opened a new account at a completely different bank and transferred my portion of the funds. Then I did something that felt both terrifying and liberating. I wrote a check returning every penny my parents had contributed to my education since my grandmother's passing, along with a brief note: "This clears any financial obligation between us. I choose to be completely independent moving forward." Andrew watched me seal the envelope. "You don't have to pay them back, you know. Parents are supposed to support their children's education without strings attached." "I know," I replied, "but I need to know that everything I achieve from now on is completely mine. No guilt, no debt, no obligations. They can never say I owe them anything." Through it all, my parents continued their attempts to contact me, first with anger, then with fake concern about my mental state, then with threats to file a missing person report, despite knowing exactly where I was. Their messages revealed their true worry, not my well-being, but how my disappearance would look to others in their social circle. "Your father had to make excuses at the club yesterday," my mother wrote in one email that made it past my filters. "People are asking questions. The Hendersons saw the whole thing at the restaurant and are spreading gossip. This behavior reflects poorly on all of us." Even in their supposed concern for me, it was really about them. Their reputation, their embarrassment, their inconvenience. Reading that message crystallized something for me. I had never actually mattered to them as a person, only as an extension of their image. I didn't respond to any of their messages. Instead, I focused on preparing for my new life in Seattle. I researched neighborhoods online, looking for an affordable apartment in a safe area with good public transportation.
I studied the transit system and local amenities. I read everything I could about the Bowman Institute and the specific research projects I would be joining. I also began reading books about emotional healing and family estrangement. I learned that what I was doing, going no contact, was actually a recognized strategy for dealing with toxic family relationships. There were support forums full of people who had made similar choices, and reading their stories helped me feel less alone and more confident in my decision. Exactly 1 week after graduation, Harper, Andrew, and I loaded my Honda Civic with my essential belongings. The trunk and back seat were packed with carefully labeled boxes, leaving just enough room for a small overnight bag on the passenger seat. My entire life fit into a compact car. It was both sobering and oddly freeing. "Here's an emergency credit card," Harper said, pressing a card into my hand. "Andrew and I got it for you, just in case something happens on the road or you need help getting settled." "And this is from both of us," Andrew added, handing me a sealed envelope. "Don't open it until you reach Seattle. It's a welcome to your new life gift." I hugged them both, fighting tears. After everything my parents had put me through, these friends had become my chosen family. They celebrated my successes, supported my dreams, and loved me exactly as I was. "I can't thank you enough," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Just build a good life," Harper said, squeezing me tight. "That's all the things we need. And call us every night until you get there safely. And send pictures of Seattle," Andrew added. "I want to live vicariously through your adventure." As I drove away from my college town, watching Harper and Andrew wave from the sidewalk in my rearview mirror, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Grief for the family I'd never had, terror about the unknown future ahead, but also excitement about the possibility of becoming whoever I wanted to be without anyone else's expectations weighing me down. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Landon, who specialized in family trauma. Our weekly sessions were often painful but clarifying. She helped me understand that my parents' behavior wasn't normal or acceptable, despite how they had trained me to see it as such. "What your parents said to you was emotional abuse," she stated plainly in one session. "And from what you've described, it was part of a lifelong pattern of conditional love and criticism." "I still feel guilty sometimes," I admitted, "for cutting them off completely. Maybe I'm being too harsh." "Guilt is common in children of emotionally unavailable parents," she explained. "You were conditioned to believe that their happiness and comfort were your responsibility. But they were the parents. Your well-being should have been their priority, not the other way around." Working with Dr. Landon, I began to understand how deeply my parents' treatment had affected me. My perfectionism, my anxiety, my tendency to apologize for taking up space. Recognizing these patterns was the first step toward changing them. "You've been trained to believe that love is conditional," she explained during one particularly illuminating session, "that you have to earn affection through achievements and compliance. But healthy love isn't something you earn. It's something you receive simply for being who you are." The concept was revolutionary to me. I had never experienced unconditional love from my parents, so I didn't know what it looked like or felt like. Dr. Landon helped me recognize it in the friendships I was building. Harper and Andrew's continued support despite the distance. Sophia's easy acceptance of my quirks. Marcus's interest in my thoughts and opinions without any agenda. The first holiday season away from my family brought unexpected challenges. Thanksgiving and Christmas had never been particularly warm in our household, but they were familiar traditions nonetheless. Now I faced them alone, 3,000 miles from anyone I'd known longer than a few months. November arrived with Seattle's characteristic gray skies, and I found my mood dipping as the holiday approached. The city was full of people making travel plans to visit family, and I felt the weight of having no family to visit. Social media was filled with posts about family gatherings and gratitude for loved ones, making my isolation feel even more pronounced.
Sophia noticed my change in demeanor during one of our weekly coffee dates. "First holidays are the hardest," she said gently, though I hadn't told her my situation in detail. "I don't know your story, but I can see you're struggling with something." I hesitated, then decided to trust her with a simplified version of the truth. "I'm not in contact with my family anymore. We had a serious falling out after graduation." She didn't push for details or offer empty reassurances about family always working things out. Instead, she said something that surprised me. "Come to my family's Thanksgiving. My mom always cooks for an army, and we have a strict no questions policy for strays." I accepted gratefully and found myself at a chaotic, loving family gathering that bore no resemblance to the formal, tense holiday meals of my childhood. Sophia's mother argued good-naturedly about the proper way to carve a turkey. Her brothers told embarrassing stories about each other. Her grandmother insisted on second helpings for everyone, piling food onto plates without asking permission. What struck me most was how no one asked about my family or why I wasn't with them. They simply welcomed me as Sophia's friend and treated me like I belonged. When Sophia's mother saw me helping clear dishes, she actually shooed me away from the kitchen. "You're a guest," she insisted warmly. "Sit down and let us take care of you." The kindness was overwhelming. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried quietly, not from sadness, but from the realization of what family could actually feel like. This was what unconditional acceptance looked like. Being welcomed not because of what you achieved or how you presented yourself, but simply because you were valued as a person. For Christmas, Marcus invited me to join a group of friends for what they called Misfit Christmas, a gathering of people who, for various reasons, weren't with biological family for the holiday. There was Elena, a nurse whose family lived overseas; David, an artist whose conservative parents had cut him off for being gay; Sarah, a teacher whose toxic family she'd chosen to distance herself from. We exchanged inexpensive but thoughtful gifts, played board games, and sang off-key carols while making dinner together. It wasn't perfect, but it was warm and genuine. Nobody felt sorry for themselves or spent the evening complaining about their family situations. Instead, we created our own tradition based on acceptance and joy. "This is what chosen family looks like," Elena said as we sat around Marcus's living room, full of homemade cookies and terrible wine. "People who choose to love each other without conditions or expectations." The phrase chosen family resonated deeply with me. I was learning that family wasn't just about DNA or legal connections. It was about people who showed up for you consistently, who celebrated your successes without jealousy, who supported you through difficulties without judgment. Slowly, I was building new traditions and connections that nourished me rather than depleted me. My work at the Institute was going exceptionally well. I had received my first promotion after just 1 year, becoming a research coordinator with more responsibility and better pay. My research on emotional resiliency in adolescents was gaining attention in academic circles, and I had been invited to present at several conferences. Dr. Whitman had begun including me in high-level strategy meetings and encouraging me to present our findings at national conferences. She had told me during my performance review, "You have a gift for translating complex research into accessible insights. Have you considered pursuing a doctorate? With your abilities and work ethic, you could lead your own research team someday." The suggestion both thrilled and terrified me. Graduate school meant more years of education, more investment in a field my parents had dismissed as worthless. But it also meant following my passion to its logical conclusion, building expertise that could help vulnerable young people in ways I wished someone had helped me. "I'd like to think about it," I told her, though part of me already knew my answer. Marcus and I had begun dating seriously, and our relationship was unlike anything I'd experienced before. He never tried to change me or mold me into his ideal partner. Instead, he seemed genuinely curious about who I was and what made me happy. "There's something about you," he said one evening as he watched the sunset from a park overlooking Puget Sound. "You have this strength that feels like it came from overcoming something significant. I don't need to know what, but I respect whatever journey brought you here." 2 years after graduation, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, a significant upgrade from my first studio, with an actual bedroom and a view of the Space Needle. I was wearing the Phoenix necklace from Harper and Andrew, who remained steadfast friends despite the distance. 3 years after that devastating graduation dinner, I stood at a podium presenting my research findings at a national conference in Chicago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was back in a city just hours from where my parents lived, but I was here as Dr. Camila Johnson, respected researcher, not as their disappointing daughter. As I spoke confidently about the importance of emotional validation in healthy development, I caught sight of the phoenix pendant resting against my collarbone and smiled slightly at the symbolism. The journey from that restaurant to this podium had been long and often painful. But like the phoenix, I had emerged from the ashes of rejection stronger and more authentic than before. Our research demonstrates that children who experience consistent emotional invalidation from caregivers show significantly higher rates of anxiety, depression, and attachment disorders in adulthood, I told the audience of fellow researchers and practitioners. However, we've also found that with proper intervention and support systems, these patterns can be interrupted and healed. As I spoke these words, I was thinking about my own journey. The intervention had been cutting contact with toxic influences. The support system had been therapy, chosen family, and learning to validate myself. After my presentation, I was approached by Dr. Sarah Martinez from Stanford University. "Your work is groundbreaking," she said. "We've been looking for someone to head up a new research initiative on family trauma and resilience. Would you be interested in discussing the position?" Stanford, one of the most prestigious universities in the country, the kind of opportunity my parents would have respected if they had been capable of respecting anything I achieved in psychology. "I'd be very interested," I replied, feeling a surge of pride that had nothing to do with external validation and everything to do with personal satisfaction. 6 months later, I was packing for another cross-country move, this time to California, to begin my new role as Director of Family Dynamics Research at Stanford. Marcus was coming with me. Our relationship had deepened into something beautiful and supportive, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. "Ready for another adventure?" he asked, loading boxes into our rental truck. "More than ready," I replied, looking around my Seattle apartment one last time. This place had been my sanctuary, my first real home, but I was ready to take everything I'd learned here and build something even better. The email arrived on Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after I'd settled into my new office at Stanford. The subject line read simply, "We need to talk." My father had somehow obtained my work email, which was publicly listed on the university website. The message was brief. "My mother and I will be in San Francisco next weekend for a medical conference. We would like to meet with you. Please respond with a time and place." No apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened 3.5 years earlier. Just the expectation that I would comply, as I always had before. I sat staring at the screen, my heart racing, unsure how to respond or whether to respond at all. I forwarded the email to Dr. Landon, who I'd continued seeing via video sessions since moving to California, and asked for an emergency appointment that evening. "You don't owe them a meeting," she reminded me as I sat in her virtual office. "Your boundaries are valid and necessary." "I know," I said, "but part of me thinks that if I don't see them, they'll continue to have power over me, like I'm still running, still afraid." We discussed the options thoroughly. Meeting them could provide closure, but it could also reopen wounds I'd worked hard to heal. Not meeting them would maintain my peace but might leave me always wondering if they had changed. If you decide to meet them, Dr. Landon advised, do it on your terms. A public place, a time limit, clear boundaries, and have support ready afterward. After careful consideration, I replied to my father's email. I will meet you at Westlake Coffee Shop Saturday at 11 a.m. I can stay for 30 minutes only. The coffee shop was busy enough to be public, but quiet enough for conversation. It was near Marcus's apartment, where I planned to go immediately after. Both Marcus and my Stanford colleague Jennifer knew what was happening and had promised to be available if I needed them. When Saturday arrived, I dressed carefully in a professional outfit that made me feel confident. Charcoal gray slacks, a blue silk blouse, and the phoenix necklace for courage. I arrived 15 minutes early to select a table in the corner where I could see the door. They entered precisely at 11, looking older than I remembered, but otherwise unchanged. My father in a business casual outfit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My mother in a designer dress with her signature pearl necklace. They spotted me immediately and made their way over, my father leading with purposeful strides. "Camila," he said, extending his hand as if this were a business meeting, "you look well." I shook his hand briefly, but didn't rise for the hug my mother seemed to expect. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the chairs across from me. The conversation that followed was predictable. They wanted things to go back to normal. They were concerned about appearances. They had no real understanding of the harm they'd caused or interest in taking responsibility for it. "We're still your parents," my father said, as our time ran out, his tone carrying the authority that once would have silenced me immediately. "Biology made you my parents," I acknowledged, standing to leave. "You chose not to be my family. Family supports, family accepts, family loves unconditionally. You did none of those things." As I walked out of that coffee shop, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete peace with my decision. They would never change, but I had, and that was enough. What I learned through it all was something I now share with the young people in my research studies and the families I work with in my practice. Your worth is inherent, not earned. Your value doesn't depend on someone else's ability to see it. And sometimes, the family you choose matters more than the family you were born into. The words that were meant to destroy me, "We wish you were never born," had instead been the catalyst for my rebirth. I had taken their rejection and transformed it into freedom. I had built a life filled with people who celebrated my authentic self, rather than trying to reshape me into their image of success. Today, I'm Dr. Camila Johnson, Director of Family Dynamics Research at Stanford University. I have published papers that have influenced therapeutic practices across the country. I have a husband who loves me exactly as I am, friends who support my dreams, and work that makes a difference in people's lives. Most importantly, I have learned to love myself unconditionally, something my parents never taught me, but something I was able to discover on my own.